So the pressure of the complexity and the volume in the day, that in itself, in individual events, you would say, look, that's just part of our job. That's just what we do. And that's fine. So that's sort of the coping stress, if you like. But then when it migrates and on a continuum, it can then move across to being a time when it's either conscious or not conscious about not coping. And for me, that's when we're moving into trauma, where if unchecked and if not acknowledged, is when you really get to the far extreme of this continuum where people suicide.
I'm Gerardo Pollard. I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault. Hello Vet Vaulters, and welcome back to the Vet Vault. When we started this podcast, one of our big aims was to talk about the good stuff about vet science. Both Gerardo and I felt that there was a lot of talk about the bad stuff. A lot of people complaining about how hard it was to be a vet, and just a lot of negativity really. So we said, let's get together all of the vets we can find who are happy with their vet careers and talk to them to find out how they do it. Our aim was basically to get more positivity out there into the vet world. But here's the thing though, we can focus on the good, but it doesn't make the bad go away. And the reality is that a lot of people in our profession are struggling. And what we're learning is that whilst it's great to talk about the good stuff, it's also important to sometimes take a long hard look at the things that aren't that great. You cannot consistently get to the good without getting to know the bad. So with that in mind, we have a few episodes lined up to tackle some of the biggest issues in veterinary science. The stuff that makes people say, enough's enough, I'm out of here. So to kick us off, for this episode, we talked to a duo who are out on a mission to not only talk about the hard stuff, but to train people to get better at identifying and get better at dealing with the psychological challenges of our job.
Rhonda Andrews is a psychologist with almost 3 decades of experience. She's also the principal psychologist and managing director of the Barrington Centre, which provides organisational and personal psychological services to a large number of sectors both in Australia and abroad, for industries like government, education, legal, entertainment, and emergency services. Recently, Rhonda has partnered with one of our own, Dr. Louisa Johnson. Dr. Louisa is a veterinarian who has a special interest in staff welfare and new grad care, and she is the founder of Safer Vets. Rhonda and Louisa have been working together to adapt the Systems of Support program for the veterinary industry. Systems of Support, or SOS, is a positive psychological health program that was designed for high-stress professionals and is perfect for the vet world. It's an evidence-based program that helps to reduce the negative psychological impacts associated with work. That's the bad stuff that we talked about before, the things that can lead to anxiety, burnout, depression, or worse. I'll put a link to this fantastic program in the episode description as well as in our show notes.
In this conversation, we talk about some ideas that we're all familiar with, like how to live with those damn self-critical voices that we all carry around inside our heads, as well as some concepts that are brand new to me. Now, if I say trauma, is that something that you associate with your job? Not really, right? But have you heard of cumulative trauma? Or what about vicarious trauma? In this episode, Rhonda and Louisa introduce these very important concepts of those insidious, unexpected, sometimes small little things that add up and add up and add up until it can suddenly become overwhelming. But don't worry, it's not a doom and gloom and fear-mongering episode. This is a conversation about identifying the risks and putting preventative actions in place to protect ourselves as well as our friends and colleagues.
Before we kick off, just a word of thanks to our friends at Hesker Australia for supporting this series of episodes. When we spoke to them to see what message they wanted us to get out to you, they told us nothing. We're happy to support anything that helps veterinary teams take better care of themselves. So there you go. No sponsorship message other than take care of yourself.
Come on, surely we have to say something. Let's just say that if you're trying to reimagine the way you run your in-house labs, as well as your digital radiology, and you really should, then go to hesker.com.au to find out what is possible. Now, back to our guests. Please enjoy Rhonda Andrews and Louisa Johnson. Vet Vaulters, Rhonda and Louisa, welcome to the Vet Vault.
Thank you very much.
It's great to be here.
Rhonda, you can't wave. Nobody can see you, mate.
I'm waving. Hello.
I brush my hair for
Half
this.
the time, I'm sure you guys think I'm not here, but I am here every single time.
So we've got a psychologist, yes, Rhonda, and a veterinarian. And I suspect we're going to get into pretty deep, serious ground during this conversation. But let's start a little bit lighter. I've asked this of a few guests at the beginning of the show. Once I drove down the highway and there was a big graffiti on the side of a building that said, "Bad decisions make for good stories."
I like that.
And I saw that, I was like, that's a really good question for the podcast. Is that true or false? And if you think it's true, then have you got an example for us? I don't know who wants to take that.
Oh, well, yes. I think I can talk to that topic, although I don't know if it's a bad decision or just evidence of bad parenting or something. But my husband and I are both vets and we have 2 small children, and I think a lot of vets would resonate with the morning routine can often be fairly chaotic when you're both trying to get to work. And this particular morning, we got up, one person was changing nappies, someone was feeding the cat, someone was putting the rubbish bins out, there was coffee being made, bills being paid, and sort of a whirlwind of activity as we all got out the door. We dropped the first child off at kindy, everything was going well, and then sort of realised that the toddler was not going so well. It was quite snivelly and whingy and in a really foul mood. And I turned around and said, "What's going on? This is so not like you. You know, you're so grumpy." At which point she said, "I'm really upset because I'm hungry because nobody fed me breakfast." I thought, oh my gosh, these supposedly high-achieving human beings who forget the basic human needs of our child. But I'm sure a lot of vets can resonate with that and sort of all the balls juggling in the air and maybe not doing it successfully all the time. But I don't know if it's a bad decision or whether it was a bad decision for us to have kids or whether it was just a bad moment. But anyhow.
I think that's just reality. I think it's reality because like my recollections of childhood is that I used to go to sleep in my school uniform, wake up in my school uniform, go to school in my school uniform, and then do that for 3 days straight. And then someone then said, "What's that mark on your neck?" And it's like, "What mark?" And then it's like they lick their finger and they touch it and it's like, "Oh, that's dirt." And I'm like, okay, it's time for a shower now. It's time for a shower now. So if I can get through life, wearing the same clothes for 3 days straight, which makes me think that I probably wore the same undies for 3 days straight.
That's impressive. That is quite impressive.
You could probably survive a lot.
So I'll share one. Bad decision makes a great story. So this is a bit more lighthearted than yours, Louisa. But this is quite a few years ago, but it's a ripper. And I'd saved to buy some beautiful French lingerie. And we were going out for a lovely meal in Largan Street, Carlton. And as we were walking down the street, I just felt $1 million. Thought this is fantastic. Got all the underwear on, the gear on that I've just loved all my life. Now, as we're walking along, I feel the elastic go. And I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? And I can feel the knickers dropping. And I'm thinking, right at this point, do I grab the sides of myself and try and hold it all together, or do I just let it drop? So I thought, just take it, chill pill, let it drop, step over it, keep walking. So I made the decision just to let it drop, walk over, only to hear this little voice behind going, "Lady, lady,
No.
you've lost your undies." This is in Largan Street, Carlton, with hundreds of people all sitting outside having a beautiful meal, only to know there was a media guy there who thought this was the perfect opportunity of taking a few snaps, and I ended up on the front page.
Oh my word, this is worse.
No way. That is
Lady lost knickers.
Oh.
And they
Oh my gosh.
Is that on the web? Let's put that in the show notes, Hewitt.
That is like a nightmare. Yes, we need a link to that, Rhonda.
Yes. So there we go.
Epic.
bad decision.
Have you have that newspaper clipping saved somewhere?
Yeah.
Somewhere, yes.
Oh, please, you have to send it to me. I can put it in the show. I've got a comment for both of your stories. First, Louisa, I love your story because once I was mentally preparing for one of these interviews, and I was thinking, okay, let's ask that question again. And I thought, I wonder what I would say if somebody asked me that question. And the first thing that popped into my head was kids. Just
Bad
immediately,
parenting.
bad decision. Lots of good stories. Rhonda, for you, it's hilarious. My wife's granny, long since passed away, she had a very firm belief that you do not leave the house without a bobby pin. Is it? No, what's the little? No,
safety pin.
Safety pin. Thank you.
Pin.
Safety pin stuck through your knickers in case you have some sort of underwear drama.
Malfunction.
So you can malfunction it.
Oh,
and she was 90 something when she passed away, and to the final day she never left the home without a safety pin tucked
What
in.
a lady. What a lady.
So she's a great example, Hubert, of consequence management, thinking what's the secondary and tertiary consequences that can happen, even if it is French lingerie.
Wow, okay, well, that's really cool. I like that. The consequence management. Management.
Rhonda's got all the lingo.
It's like, okay, the consequence management, like one of the biggest fears we have as veterinarians is making the wrong call, you know, and then all of a sudden, like myself personally, it's funny, Hubert and I just did a podcast about 2 weeks ago about the board, and I got called in front of the board again, right?
Literally 2 days after we recorded an episode about what it's like if you get
yes.
in front of the board, he phones me and says, guess what?
Not relating to the podcast. About
No, that's right. Oh, no. It was about a case that I was involved in. And like, it's legit. Like, I think it's reasonable. We actually told the owner, look, if you want to take this further, go to the board. So hence I'm in front of the board. The consequence management is one of the hardest things that I feel that veterinarians face because, you know, like as humans, and what one of the things that I feel is that we don't integrate the wins as best that we can. Like so many times, how many times do you do good in the world? How many times do you do good in the day? And then all of a sudden, one thing happens and the consequences, and you're like, I'm never going to practice like this again. So what does consequence management mean? And yeah.
That is so true. I totally agree. You know, I've been mentoring a lot of new grads, and I mean, I see it in experienced vets as well. I know I've done it myself, where you can have an amazing day and one case or one negative comment from a client can send you into a bit of a tailspin that then you ruminate about that case. And I think Rhonda would see that a lot in professionals in general.
Yeah, and you do. And it's a really good point, Gerardo, that you make, because it is that imbalance between what's all the great wins that we've had, however small or large in the day, and then what's one or partial one, or maybe even our perception of what's occurred that may not be shared with anyone else. But yet, exactly what Louisa said, we ruminate or we self-blame or we judge ourselves, and then we're looking at, okay, well, what's the consequence of that? One good thing I'll share with you is we do a lot around consequence management, and we actually do it for both the good and the bad. So we're, in a sense, rather than judging it, it's up in the planning of, before I perform this operation or before I actually do X, Y, or Z, what is it? What's my first, what's plan A? And if something goes awry, what's plan B? And so there's, if you like, that those thinking of those options beforehand, so then you're not caught on the fly or you're not judging yourself after the fact.
Yeah, that's actually really good. And to add a clinical perspective to that, it's like I'm going into a surgery for a splenectomy, right? And so sometimes you just jump in there and just get your way through it, and somehow everyone gets through it. But then you could ask yourself like 5 questions. Like, one, what are the complications we're likely to encounter? Hypotension and potentially death. Okay. So how are we going to manage that hypertension? What instruments do we need? Do we need blood? Should we defrost it? Like, what are the contingencies for hypertension and so forth? So that's consequence management moving into a clinical situation.
I don't know. I agree. I think sometimes I'm almost like a doomsday prepper. Like I sort of go overboard in that consequence management to the point where I think I almost convinced the client to start digging the hole for the patient in the backyard, like it's just like it's a vaccine or something. And they're sort of choosing the urn. And it's sort of a case of, hang on, I actually can achieve this and I will probably get your pet through this, but I've kind of talked them around all the potential negative outcomes because I'm just so mindful of managing their expectations so that we're all on the same page and there's no kind of nasty surprises when it bleeds out or there's, need to quickly get blood into it or something like that. So maybe I've gone too far the other way, but I completely agree. It's sort of going through what could potentially happen here and what do we need and being ready for the different outcomes. It's a skill, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think certainly if we look at it from a psychological perspective and a cognitive perspective, it actually is really good to stop that rumination and stop that judgment of yourself. It's a great catalyst to short circuit that cycle. Just so both of you know, Barrington Centre works very closely in the emergency management industries across Australia and Asia Pacific, and that's one of our key trainings for what I call first responders, and vets are the same. You are first responders, and so therefore that's something that we are instilling in their thinking and in their, if you like, their working paradigm, so that we stop at the far end any post-traumatic stress.
Okay, so you say that's important to stop that rumination process, because I mean that's huge in outside of work as well. And I think us vets are particularly good at ruminating. I mean, I sent you that question that I had from a listener about she had she suggested this as a topic to discuss, and she said she'd done her membership exams and pre-exam, but then also post writing it, that going over it in your head, going, man, I stuffed that up. Man, I'm such an idiot. Why did you do that? And psyching yourself out of doing something, or afterwards beating the crap out of yourself, emotionally and mentally. So we need to stop it. But how do you stop it? What are the tools that you equip your clients with, Rhonda?
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because I think we need to differentiate, reflection. So it's important to reflect on what happened, because you can't stop personality types like vets who are perfectionists by trade and are going to say that and judge themselves anyhow. So you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you've got to say that's what they will do. But then it's about being able to say, okay, rather than then just going through that broken record of just, you're an idiot. Why did you do that? That's a stupid thing to have done. You knew the answer anyhow. Why didn't you pull that out when you really needed to? You've spoken about it so many times, blah, blah, blah. And I think what is important is that it is getting rid of the criticism of the I, I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, because as soon as you start to tag that language, you can't get away from it. It then becomes like it morphs into everything that you do. So it bleeds out, not just from that exam or not from that particular operation. It starts to generalize itself. And that's where when you ask Hubert about where do you start, you stop the I blame statements like I'm an idiot, that name calling, because that's the thing that then people can't actually escape from.
Is that similar to like ownership of the language and the shit that goes on inside your head? It's like your head speaks to you all fucking day and tells you, hey, Gerardo, you're a dickhead. Hey, Gerardo, you're a numbnut. Oh my God, Gerardo, you forgot the differentials for diarrhea for a puppy, right? Right. But because my brain speaks to me all day, it tells me all sorts of like horrible things.
All of our brains do.
Yes.
All of our brains do. And I think that it's not until we tune into those thought patterns that we can identify that they are actually inherently fairly negative at times. And I think that we're definitely our own worst enemies. And I think that a lot of vets could benefit from work to improve their own self-esteem and their own inner voice.
Self-talk.
And the self-talk, and it can be something you can be trained to improve and learn to move away from it being so negative, because it's unhelpful.
Is it a fact of just, okay, because my take in it is that my brain speaks to me all day and I just decide to go, yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, no, I'll let that go, right? Because I can't control whatever the hell this fella in here says. And slowly I train him by accepting the things that I want to listen to. But like, my feel is that every time I've fought something, every time I've gone like, no, this is not me, like, no. It just feels like it perpetuates. Like I don't know. Is there like what you resist persists kind of thing with your head?
Oh, totally, Rhonda.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right, because what's behind that, Gerardo, is that's probably, it's got so much force behind it that you've already given it a big lot of space. So as soon as you say, no, stop it, don't do that, it just goes bang, I'm just going to give you it 100% more than what you just had. And that's that little attention-seeking part in you going, hey, don't forget about me. And so what we know is something that you try and shove down and stop is probably one of the biggest things that is happening with you. So rather than attacking it head on, because it'll just take you to the kill, is actually just being able to say, I hear you, but actually, do I want to accept you 100%? Or do I want to make a slight variation on what you're telling me? And it's sort of like chipping away and start to slowly change parts of that message rather than trying to take it on full bore and try and say, I'm going to whack you out of 100%.
I want to go back quickly, Rhonda. I feel like we've moved past what you were starting to say, because we're talking about the theory, but I still want to know how do you put the rubber to the road? So you say we don't use that I'm an idiot language, which I like. I heard somebody said the other day that the biggest bully that you'll ever meet lives inside your head. And that's such a fact, isn't it? So how do you speak about it? How do you change that language? What do you say differently?
Yeah, and I think certainly, Hubert, in that what's really important is a whole range of different things. And the first one is to drop the judgment or the name calling about yourself. The second is to actually put it on a scale of how bad is this? Like from 0 to 10, is this a catastrophe? Has this now damaged my total profession? Am I going to be out on the street because no one will ever want me as a vet? And so it's ranking it from 0 to 10, 10 being the worst thing that's ever happened in your life. So you start to then put it on a catastrophe scale. So then you can see the variations, because when you start to self-blame, everything looks bad. Like, everything's at 10 out of 10. So you start to compare it with, say, what would it be if I got a phone call from the school and my 3-year-old's unconscious? How does that rank to something that, I've cut a dog in the wrong spot or such, how do they compare? So it's doing that catastrophizing. I think also it is very much around what's my learning out of this. So rather than just beating myself up, if I've done this multiple times, then give yourself a whack. But if this is a time that is a first, or it's a new pattern, then, okay, what do I want to do differently? So what you're changing is, I'm not just going to sit here and wallow in it. What am I going to do differently when I perform that operation, or when I have that sort of client that's going to always bang on about the price?
Yeah. I like that a lot. I can't remember where I heard this once, and this kind of works for me. This is my problem with a lot of these things is, I read stuff and it resonates, and when I try it, it works, but then I forget to use it, and you just slip back into all those bad habits. So it's almost like you should just practice it. It's a bit like reading a book about riding a bicycle, and you think, I can ride it, and you just get on the bike and you smash your face into the ground. but I forget where I heard this, but somebody said, accept that exactly as you say, everybody does it. So when you hear that voice beating you up, it's actually evolution. It's an evolutionary advantage, because it's your subconscious trying to teach you, trying to stop you from making mistakes, from getting into trouble. So if it thinks that you did something dumb, or you did something that potentially dangerous,
trying to keep you safe.
Exactly. So it's normal. So to go, okay, look, this is happening. I recognize it's happening, but it's normal. I'm not crazy. And then saying, okay, I'm going to let you do your job. I'm going to give you an hour or half an hour or 20 minutes, and we're going to think about this. We're going to mull it over, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to write down, okay, what out of this situation do you want me to learn? And when we're done with this, then we're done. Then we shut up. Then you leave me alone.
Yeah.
And that kind of does work. I like it. And then when that voice comes back later, then you can go, stop, hang on, we've dealt with this.
You had your appointment.
We're done. Get away.
Oh, that is super powerful to go, yeah, I'm going to give myself the next 3 hours to wallow and whine and then hurt myself in my head and so forth. But then after that, at 11 o'clock, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to wake up the next day and it's going to be. Yeah.
I mean, it actually is very powerful, Hubert, about that sort of mini contracting, because that's what that is. You know, you can beat yourself up for X number of hours or half an hour, and then that's the line in the sand. And I think the other thing that you've said, which is also important, is you talked about practice. And that's a really key thing because, you know, for you as vets, you didn't go straight out of VCE and go, okay, now I'm a fully qualified vet. You know, 6 years plus later, you're doing it. So it's amazing that we put the pressure on ourselves that we can go from ground zero to think we can be 100% perfect in our brains when we're not doing any practice in it, but yet we skill up in everything else.
And what do you think about this, Rhonda? I always think about we're such a funny cohort, I think, as vets. We're probably no different to a lot of other professions, but we are probably largely perfectionists and quite high achievers and have been all through primary school and high school, and suddenly we hit vet school and we're very, very average. And then we come out into the profession and we really feel like, what on earth? You know, we're faced with an appointment to do an anal gland expression and it's sort of like, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing this. What is this? You know, it's a basic skill, but it can really stump a new grad. And so maybe from the start, you sort of feel like you're on the back foot, perhaps.
Yeah, and it is that comparison of the cohort, isn't it? That, you know, you've been, as you say, top of the tree for most of your life, and then you sort of become Mr. Average, Mrs. Average, Ms. Average, and it's sort of like, well, where do I fit? So it comes, for me, what you're highlighting, Louisa, it comes down to how do I describe who I am? How am I measuring myself and my identity and my self-esteem? And we do that by our comparison to our peers.
Okay, so comparison to your peers, and that's really shit because, you know, some of your peers might be 10 years experienced and have gone through so many like more struggles and pains and so forth, right? Is it better to compare to where you were before, or and acknowledge the growth that you've had? I don't know. If you're going to compare to something, what do you compare to?
Yeah, and that's a really great point, Gerardo, because, you know, the theory says compare yourself with yourself. So where have you come from to? You can't help where in an innate behaviour where we go, shit, how am I with Hubert? How am I with Gerardo? How am I compared to Louisa? But it's okay to do that, providing then that doesn't become your driver or, more importantly, your judge of yourself. And so that's where it's got to be contained. And I think that's one of the hardest things, because we see that all the time where, you know, whether that's your profession, whether that's eating disorders, whether that's someone within the workplace, you know, that they're trying to aim for being someone else. And that's where for us, in what we're talking about today, is where that stress versus trauma can come in.
Okay, yeah. So let's jump into that straight away then. When I researched you and I read through some of your work that you've done for your business, systems of support, there's a program that you run out in businesses to work on resilience building and that. And those were two words that jumped out at me, or one word specifically is trauma. It's not something I associate with our profession so much, but maybe I'm oblivious. I read it and went, well, is there trauma? Because there's a lot of talk, and I think that's probably why this conversation came about. A lot of talk about burnout and stress and attrition from the profession, and why are vets and vet nurses leaving the profession in the numbers that they are, and what can we do about it? Where does trauma come into all of this? Is it a thing for us?
Yeah, and Louisa, perhaps would you like to lead on this to begin with, and then I'd like to come in behind you just with some of these terms.
Yeah, when Rhonda and I started working together and collaborating, and we met at the vet clinic. So Rhonda is a client at the clinic that I worked at for 13 years up until January. And we used to just chat in the consult room. And she said, we've got this systems of support program that we've used for other professional groups that have high levels of stress. And I nearly fell over and I said, maybe the vet industry or the vet profession may benefit from this. And we sort of got talking and got quite excited about it. But when we started chatting, one of the things that Rhonda kept mentioning was trauma. And I sort of said, with stress, we can get quite stressed and we can see cases that are stressful. But trauma, I don't know, Rhonda, if it really applies. I'm thinking trauma is, you've witnessed a car accident or you've had an armed robbery at home or, something like this. And Rhonda said, oh no, hang on a second, and sort of had to educate me, because there are moments in our, not necessarily every day, but there are moments in our weeks or months as vets that are traumatic. And I was just blown away to then tune into those and to acknowledge, we probably are fairly dismissive of situations that are pretty full on that we're participating in, or we're potentially not causing, but our recommendations are leading to trauma being experienced by our clients. So we're sort of witnessing vicarious trauma. But there's lots of little scenarios, and I think a lot of them come up on vet forums fairly frequently, things like clients that are suicidal after the loss of a pet, the effect that a suicidal friend or colleague in the industry has on us, the welfare cases, euthanasia of the healthy pet, the animals that come in that are badly injured, that were sort of scraping up off the road, or the herd health, crises where the farmers are experiencing drought or they've experienced a bushfire, or, there's really awful scenarios. And so I think there's some of those are obviously traumatic, but other aspects of what we do, such as participating in euthanasias for clients where that's their primary love of their life, these sorts of things definitely, I realise now, are probably quite traumatic.
And so I guess with regards to your question, Hubert, about trauma, and I think is exactly what Louisa said, and I've had this experience when I speak to vets. So the way I explain it is like on a continuum, that yes, we have stressful events, and there are those that on the whole every day, it can be just the sheer number of people, sheer number of animals that you're having to see during the day, so that the pressure, if you like, of the complexity and the volume in the day. And so that in itself, in individual events, you would say, look, that's just part of our job. That's just what we do. And that's fine. So that's sort of the coping stress, if you like. But then when it migrates and on a continuum, it can then move across to being a time when it's either conscious or not conscious about not coping, or that the complexity has increased. And for me, that's when we're moving into trauma, where if unchecked and if not acknowledged, is when you really get to the far extreme of this continuum where people suicide. And so for me, the trauma is really important to call out. Otherwise, we're dismissive. We're saying, because as soon as you just say the word stress, it's overused in our language now. And it's, in a sense, it's like, oh yeah, that's just every day, like I have my breakfast. And so there's nothing, there's, in a sense, it has a dismissive nature about it. As soon as you start talking about vicarious trauma or cumulative trauma, people, it really takes stock. And it's important we actually name it for what it is. So for me, cumulative trauma is like the slow burn. That's the stuff that day in, day out, separately things can be coped with, but when you start to build it up over months and years, unchecked and not in any way being able to debrief or in some way process that, that's when people go, and you see it all the time in vets, go from 0 to 100, from looking like they're coping to absolutely going, shit, I'm out of here. I'm not taking on this job any longer. I'm gone. I'm heading out to the coast, or, or worse is that they withdraw completely. So that's the cumulative trauma. That's that slow burn of when you keep punching holes in the bucket and it just keeps on leaking. And the other one that people don't give a name to, but I think it's really important to, is vicarious trauma. So that's the stuff when, you've got the customer crying because the cat's just been put down, or there's been an accident, and so there's a sudden change to the health of their animals. Or a herd might be lost, or, wiped out during a bushfire, or during foot and mouth disease, or whatever it might be. And it is around what happens to the customer gets transferred onto you as the vet. And so that transference isn't just a one-off. It happens unconsciously and consciously every day. And so that builds up as well. And if we don't name it and call it, then the danger for that is we assume that we should be able to deal with it, and it becomes, if you like, the hidden enemy.
So what do we do about it? Because to some degree we do have to deal with it, because it is part of our job. But I totally see what you're saying, that you take it until something breaks.
I think naming it and identifying it, that's a big first step. That was such an epiphany for me, for someone outside of our profession to say, oh, but you do realise this is actually cumulative stress. Like, this is a pretty serious thing, and this is, vicarious trauma when you're standing in that room and the person on the other side of the table is having potentially the worst day of their life and you're there. But that's pretty powerful. And then I think it really comes back to healthy coping mechanisms. What do you do in the face of stress, of work stress, and what works for you and what helps for you?
I just want to jump in there for 1 second. I totally agree with the whole cumulative stress thing that just builds up and it's done. Because as a hospital director about 3 years ago, I was in a situation where I was in charge of probably one of the largest emergency hospitals in Australia, but then project planning the next one. And this is not something that was put on my shoulders. This is something that I actively decided to do. And it just built up to the point where all of a sudden, in the middle of a meeting, someone goes, "Hey, Gerardo, can you do this?" And I almost cried. And I was like, okay, here I am right in the end. We'll talk about burnout later. But my feel though, okay, because as an emergency veterinarian, our average euthanasia rate is 25%, right? So 1 in 4, 1 in 5 patients that come and sees us is humanely euthanized. That might be massively different from a shelter worker who euthanizes every Tuesday 20 pets, right? And that would just, that's traumatic. So Rhonda, we say cumulative stress. Does perspective come into it? Because for me, like, my patients almost need euthanasia. Like, there is a valid reason why. Like, I get the pain that the owner's going through.
Yeah, but you can rationalize it.
Yeah,
justify it.
It's an act of service. It's an act of service.
And I think how we call that, when you talk about perspective, Gerardo, we call that your mindset. So, you can frame that up and say, this needs to happen. So then you don't take on board that transference of that emotion. But if for any reason, and it's not just what's happening right in front of you with that particular customer, it's what's happened in your day, what's happened at home, what's happened in the last week at home. And so they can potentially be triggers. So it could be that you've got to euthanize it, but it might be that they bring in, let's say, a 5-year-old that looks exactly like your 5-year-old, or the 5-year-old says exactly what your 5-year-old says. And all of a sudden, you're not there as a vet, you're there as a parent.
Yeah.
And then that becomes the trigger. And that's the shit that goes up underneath you and starts to become that vicarious trauma. And so, if you like, your head is fighting two things. It's saying, I know from a professional perspective, but gee, this is also, I'm a dad. And so it's when you get that, if you like, clashing or contradictions or just triggers, simultaneously, that's the thing that we need, and what we train people to do is be alert to those, because they will happen.
So awareness of triggers.
Yep, exactly.
For me as a trigger is, this is kind of sad, but it's old men crying.
Yes.
100%.
Old men crying. Oh my freaking God. I just it just gets in my soul. And I'm just,
don't get me
old men
started.
crying.
I'm with you, Gerardo. I feel the same about euthanasias in general. I always sort of felt kind of an honour to be there in that moment to help that patient and to try and give that family or that client the best version of that event as I could, if that makes sense. I sort of support them through that moment, and kind of I felt proud that they saw me. It's sort of a gift, but, and I wonder if you agree with this, but maybe it's different in emergency, is when you know that family personally. You know, where I work is where I live. So if you know that family personally, or you've looked after that pet through, 10 years of your career, and it's just been hit by a car and it's completely unsalvageable, those ones you can, as Rhonda said, you can feel it percolating up and you think, oh gosh, they're the ones that you walk out of the room and have to have a moment and gather yourself together. They're just some that get under your skin.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really is linked to that, and what both of you are saying, is very much around connection. So, when we talk about vicarious trauma and we talk about cumulative trauma, one of the things, and when you were asking Hubert, well, how do you deal with this? And Gerardo, you were speaking about perspective. Well, perspective is one thing, or the mindset's one thing. The second is about connection, because often what happens is people go home after work, they don't talk about it because they don't want to upset anyone else in the family. They don't have time to talk to their colleagues because everyone's racing around like headless chooks, and so they don't connect about it. And so that day goes into another day and into another day. And so when you don't have the connection to talk about those things, then that becomes its own build-up internally. And certainly from our research that we've done longitudinally over the past 8 years, our research has shown that connection, if we have connection, we can actually reduce the risk of any depressive or long-term anxiety moving into post-traumatic stress by over 80%.
Connection being?
Connection to people.
Just people. So family.
Yep,
friends.
Loved ones.
And because one of the biggest things with emergency and critical care is that you work night times and weekends, you lose connections with your friends, you lose connections with your uni mates, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on a Tuesday morning and everyone's working, like you haven't built that thing that helps support you.
And that's a really good point, Gerardo, because that's exactly, certainly shift workers find that all the time. And we find that in other professions like the medical profession, like surgeons. They're doing long stints of an evening. They come home and in the morning when they want to talk to someone else, well, all their surgeon colleagues are up and in surgery.
I think connection's a huge challenge for our profession. I feel like it starts even in vet school, because we smell bad, we're covered in poo, our friends that aren't studying vet all slowly drop away. They don't quite understand us. We speak a different language. We're sort of becoming connected to our vet cohort because it's a closed faculty. So we're all sort of weirdos together.
We all marry each other.
Marrying each other. And then when we're...
Is this not incestuous, is it?
Totally.
Oh yes, now our profession is incestuous. Okay, it's just 100% because only vets can understand vets. Okay.
Yeah.
Quick experiment. Everybody in this conversation who is married or in a relationship with another veterinarian, put up your hand.
Look at you three.
Yeah, Rhonda, what's wrong with you? You obviously haven't found Rhonda, you haven't found the love of your life yet, and I'm sure he's going to be a veterinarian.
You three will be delighted to know. In my first year out as a psychologist, and I went to this group, and I saw all these psychologists together. I came home and I said, "Shit, I'll never marry a psychologist."
In all seriousness, though, don't you think? Remember back to when you're a new grad and your non-vet friends say, "Oh, we're going out for dinner and we're meeting at 6:30," and you're like, "I'm never going to get there." And then if you do get there, you're an hour late. They've ordered dinner. Yep. You've got anal glands on you. Like, it's hard work. work to maintain those connections. I think naturally we are drawn back to our vet friends, and we're all equally busy and bad at maintaining those connections, and then add a few emergency vets into the mix and it's like, how have we even got any friends at all?
No, that's right. Have you got friends at all? Exactly right.
And I think, when Hubert was talking about the systems of support program, that's one of the things that we build into it. It is about that connection, and it is about building that network within the profession and diversifying who people are talking to within the profession.
So powerful, isn't it? Being able to share stories and say, oh, that happened to me. Oh, that's the same at my clinic. And then kind of feel like, all right, we're all in this together, and you're not just suffering or stressing or something about something as one person on an island, part of something bigger. And I think that's really powerful.
I feel like it has to be a pre-planned conscious decision as to who I'm going to offload to, because there's several reasons why we don't connect, even if you have friends. I don't want to be the whinger, always complain about
friend,
work.
mate. Hubert, I'm your friend. Okay.
No, but you know what I mean. You don't just want to talk work to your work friends. Your wife doesn't want to hear about it. Well, I feel like your wife doesn't hear about it all the time. There's also a culture within the profession of suck it up. It's part of the job. Stop being a little princess about it. So there's a little bit of that where you don't want to show weakness. So I almost feel like you have to have an agreement with somebody and say, mate, can I offload on you every now and again? I know, for example, a friend of mine is married to somebody in the special forces in the military. I can imagine there'd be a fair amount of stressful, traumatic events in that job. And they have to, they say to them, you're not supposed to talk out about what happens, but we appreciate that you have to talk. So pick one person. It can be your wife if you want to, or your partner, but somebody has to be your sounding board that you can tell them just your war stories, literally your war stories.
Yeah, and you are right, Hubert, that it's not ever, you don't have a huge range of people that you would do that with. And it is about selecting someone you trust, someone who will understand what you're talking about, and that they get it. And so there's not that judgment of, just suck it up, princess, that there is an empathy, a genuine empathy, not just, oh, well, I'll just go through the motions here. If we put that on a more formalized setting, a lot of professions now are introducing formal debriefs so that they have those on a regular basis with a team or a group, so that they are not only debriefing at an operational level of what's taken place, say from a clinical level, but they're also then debriefing from what we call a psychological level. How has this affected me through this week or this particular event? So that it allows people to process at those two very different levels. We all dive for the clinical side first, the operational side. So, what could we have done differently? But the key one for me is then pushing that aside and being able to say, okay, but how was I affected? How did I feel?
That's really useful. I think that sounds like it's a project for every practice to put into place, to ask all of your employees, who's your buddy, who's your dive buddy. Like they say in the dive world, to dive alone is to die alone. What's that? Is it saying when you do your dive course?
I think a lot of senior vets end up mentoring junior vets, but I feel like senior vets probably need a real sounding board as well. And we probably are relying on friendships and having our trusted buddies that we can say, oh my God, this happened today and I just completely made an error or whatever. And I think that largely comes down to workplace culture and how you get on with the other vets and what time you have in the day to be able to say, oh, mate, that was a tough case. How are you?
We call them co-striders. Co-striders are someone who is running along the same pathway as you. You can share the wins with and you can commiserate with. It's like, I understand that. I tried that. That sucked. And yes. I appreciate the challenges you face. It's like this common understanding of the pains, but like it'd be great to have it. Like, I think if you're having a co-strider that helps you move forward, right? As opposed to a co-strider that just lets you dump your shit and then just think the world's bad. It's like, okay, so what's your thoughts? How are you going to change that? How are you going to shift that? What are you going to do now? The key thing for me is the questions. If you're going to support someone, listen, hear, understand. It's like, okay, what's up to now? What do you want to do now?
Yeah, and I think you're right, Gerardo. It is being able to say, what have I experienced? But then it's what's next. So they're not just rolling in the same stuff, they're actually going to the next level. And I think just coming back to Louisa's point, which is a really important one, is the workplace culture, because it ties in with what Hubert said about the whole thing of, suck it up, princess. If that, and that's a common thing where a lot of professions where you do have a lot of perfectionism, there is little tolerance for being able to download. And so if we formalize it more, it then stops that sense of failure. It stops that negativity of perception, because really it's just part of the way we do business. It's part of the way we do the profession. So rather than, oh, you need a debrief? Oh, gee, that's a little bit odd. It becomes the way in which we operate. And so just as you get your utensils out, just as you would get your tools of the trade out for an operation, it's part of that package. And that's how we've been building it in, so that there's not a choice. And then in that choice, there's not that sense of judgment or loading of capability.
For me, okay, personally, I think there needs to be a communication, like a communication of an expectation. Hey, look, I've just went through this, and I just need to fucking let this go. Can you hear me out here and just listen to me? As opposed to, you're in the middle of typing a history and someone just wants to dump their stuff in you, and you're like, I'm trying to type this history and get the next console. And you, okay, oh wow, okay, this is deep now. This is deep. Shit.
Someone's crying.
Yep.
Someone's crying
here, and I'm typing a history. Oh my god. Okay, I think there needs to be this thing. It's like, hey G, hey Louisa, hey Rhonda, hey Rhonda, can we have a chat? Can we have a chat? I need your help here. I need to unload. I feel like there just needs to be that communication, so that person can understand their role in that process.
Absolutely, because otherwise they're hit from the side, and then you get vicarious trauma happening for the next person. So you get the domino effect.
Can I backtrack a little bit?
No, Hubert.
By all means.
No, please don't.
You mentioned the vicarious trauma again, and I want to go back to so we've talked about what can you do after the fact to get this out of your system, I suppose, to deal with it. But in the situation, it can be really hard to deal with sometimes. And it's interesting that you guys mentioned that being like the old man with a dying dog or something, and you said about the 5-year-old, the kid. So that's become my trigger. Family. Ever since I've had kids of my own, now I empathize really, really strongly with families who come in with whether it's a euthanasia or anything like that. And I got really good at reframing it, all the traumatic things. So I don't think I cried about a euthanasia or something like that for almost 15 years of my career. And then one night at work, no, that's it. It happened about a couple of years ago. One night at work, I was in a euthanasia, and I had to rush. I was like, I actually can't. I have to go outside and cry. I was so upset about it. I don't know. How do you deal with that? And I've got another question. In that question is, I feel like I move towards it more these days, whereas I used to try and avoid those emotions. Go, okay, this is going to be stressful. Just cut it off. Just deal with it, kid. Focus on the clinical aspect and just forget about it. And now it's almost like I embrace it a little bit, and somehow that's better. I feel like it's better. It's tough in the moment.
Yeah.
But I'll go out the back and cry and say to the nurses, "Man, that was really, really tough. I struggled with that." But somebody will give you a hug and you move on. I don't know how do you deal with it in the moment?
Yeah, and I think, Hubert, that's really and really great that you share that, because once again, we still have in some professions and some people's perception that if expressing your feelings, you're weak. And, that's the last thing we want as a statement. For us as psychologists, we're saying you express your feelings, you're strong, because it takes a damn lot of effort to acknowledge that. And so part of the systems of support is what we're talking about is really tap into your belief systems, understand what are those triggers, really tap into what your emotions are so you can express them and get them out. Because the more we push them down, it comes back to what Gerardo was talking about. That's when the resistance really builds up, and that's when often you get the people going from 0 to 100, from coping one day to absolutely dropping the next. And so our message is you have strength through your emotions and through sharing those, and they're far from a weakness, and tears are not a weakness. And it is about being able to, for people to actually not be afraid of feelings. Because I think one of the things of why people don't want to share feelings is generally the people who are seeing those feelings don't know what to do about them. And they're going, oh, no, don't do that.
The person's crying. What do we do?
So people get frightened of it or get anxious by it. And so they say to people, stop. And so what's the messaging we're giving our kids about that emotions are there to be expressed?
So, okay. So what advice would you give someone? So here I am. I come over to Hubert and I go, Hubert, I need to unload. And Hubert's like, oh my God, I got almost all this shit that I need to do tonight, but yeah, sure, I'll listen to you, G, unload. And then here I am, I unload about this poor old timer, it's like 80 years old. And I just put his 15-year-old Westie that tried to bite me as I was trying to euthanize it. And this Westie was the favorite dog of his wife for 50 years, right? And that was all.
She did too.
She's dead. Yeah. The wife died, and he says
to you, this is the only thing I have left of my wife.
This is the only. Oh my God, I've heard that like at least several thousand times. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the only
last memory.
This is the last memory. This is the last thing I have of my wife, and I'm putting this little Westie to sleep. So I go to Hubert after. I'm like, Hubert, I need to unload. So Hubert and I are in our lunchroom, and like, Hubert, I can't believe this, man. This is the nicest dude ever, because old guys are obviously kind of sweet. And I put this dog to sleep, and I do not know how to cope with this. I'll cry. Okay. What does Hubert do there? He's like, does he say, hey, dude, does he slap me in the face and go, hey, G, settle down, motherfucker. Come on. You got this.
Hubert's a caring and sharing individual, isn't he?
Yeah, no, that's A. A is Hubert's like not very caring. Okay. B, he's like, oh man, I don't know. I don't even know what to say in those situations. Hubert, do you know what to say in those situations?
So if Hubert was with me, I'd say, Hubert, just listen. He doesn't have to say much at all. He just needs to be there and to listen. Because, for you, Gerardo, when you're going through all of that, there's a space for just unloading that. So for the first part is just to really be able to listen. And one of the things that we look at in the program is, how does the listener sit comfortably with all that emotion? And so therefore it is about the training on being able to just summarize, just to be able to listen, just let people say, I feel like shit, I feel guilty, I feel this, or whatever it might be. Because when people are uncomfortable, they go, don't feel like that. Or no, you don't have to feel guilty. But the person is feeling guilty. So they need to be able to express it. So, for me, that's the first stage for Hubert.
Okay, and then he comes in for the hug, the weird hug. And I'm like, oh, dude, I didn't ask for that. I just wanted to listen, and you're coming in for the weird hug.
Well, I think what you're highlighting is you've got to know your audience, and is physical connection something that a person feels comfortable with, or would absolutely run a mile and think, hang on, Hubert's jumping me here.
I might nuzzle. I'm fairly thin. I would nuzzle against Hubert's neck. I'm gonna nuzzle.
Rub the back.
I'll be nuzzle. My facial hair against his neck going no.
Suddenly he's changing all his shifts so they don't coincide with yours.
That's right. I'm like, I can watch Hubert now. He is looking extremely uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. No, I'm thinking, can I sneak in a kiss while we cuddling?
I think it's just being genuine with your own reactions.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying, oh, I've got to hold it all in for the sake of Gerardo, then that's not helping anyone, because there's sort of that barrier. So there is about being able to listen. And the whole thing is, Gerardo may not want anything else other than just to let that all go and say, gee, I feel better, thanks very much. And he's out of there. So, we've got to stop making assumptions that we've got to make them feel better, or we've got to move them along straight away, because otherwise, whose needs are being met here? Is that Hubert? Is that Hubert's anxiousness that Gerardo's got to walk out of here smiling? Well, he doesn't have to.
Wow. Yes. It's the expectation you think in your own head about the outcome that you need to generate in this interaction with that person who is going through trauma.
Yeah, be happy, and you've got to smile before I'll let you go.
Yes, and if you don't, I'm going to slap you. I'm going to feed you caffeine and sugar at the same time, and somehow you walk out of there happy.
That's right, exactly. So it is exactly what you said, Gerardo. It is about what are those expectations, and what are my expectations that I'm placing on you? And I haven't even checked that out.
I don't even know where to go from here. It's like,
Yeah.
do you ask the question? You ask the question like, okay, now that you've unloaded, what do you want from me?
Well, now, that I usually the person like you, Gerardo, would say, oh, gee, thanks. That's, I feel much better. And you just walk out. Or, there then might be a question of just an open question. So how are you feeling now?
Love it. Rhonda, that's gold, because I shit you not, there are thousands of veterinarians out there that will listen to this and be in that situation where their colleague has their nurse, their reception team member or something, or their fellow veterinarian has come and unloaded on them, and they're like, what do I do with this? What's my responsibility here? It's shut up, empathize, listen, and then just go, how do you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
because you get your guidance from the person, as you said, whether that's the nurse, whether that's the administrator, whether that's another veterinary colleague, they will give you the guidance there.
wow.
Gold. It's really gold. Rhonda, Louisa, how are you for time? I have much more to talk about, but I know we can't talk all night.
Yeah, I have another question as well, but I'm fairly certain it's going to be something that's going to like just blow this out to like another 20 minutes. You ask Hubert. You go Hubert first.
I was going to talk about burnout, but I think it's too big for 5 minutes.
Oh, but that was exactly the same thing.
It's a good starting point, Hubert. Why don't we just start tackling the front end of burnout? Because I think it's a really important one. And then we can come back another time and explore it further.
Well,
Reggie, you asked your burnout question, right?
Yeah, so my big thing is, right, so we do engagement surveys every year, and there are common themes. There are common things that come up. But I feel like as if the themes that come up are influenced by the things that we say and the things that we feed, right? Right. So the next thing is now this fucking word burnout. Okay. So again, I say the fucking word burnout. It's only because it's like, I don't know if 80% of the people out there really understand what burnout is. Burnout is not tired. Burnout is like, I'm a little bit sleepy and I rocked at the work and I didn't perform quite well today. And I think I'm burnt out.
Not fatigue.
I'm burnt out, right? So Hubert's smiling here because I'm ranting, but
no, I agree. It's exactly.
Yeah.
But like, so for me, like I feel that people really need to understand what burnout means. And for me, I had a conversation with our leadership team and say, hey, look, you got to catch this word, okay? This is a catchphrase right now. And because one of our vets was like, oh, I feel burnt out. And then one of our senior vets goes, well, why do you feel burnt out? Oh, because I woke up this morning and I felt a bit tired.
Yeah, and you're right. I think we do have to catch that language. That's what happened with the word anxiety.
Oh,
everyone was
love
all
it.
of a sudden
It just went straight there.
And so it's all of a sudden we've got a whole population of anxiety. And for those who have children will also know the same thing happened when all of a sudden the labeling of ADHD came in. Just because your kid ran around, it was like, You're being diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
The kid's just running around like a normal kid. So I think you're spot on with language, and I think we do have to catch ourselves and not get caught up in that. And for me, there is a continuum, as you've all highlighted. There's tiredness, there's fatigue, there's restlessness, there's disappointment, there's frustration, there's all of those things that happen as a vet. But burnout is right at the other end of that continuum, and that is a cumulative effect over a long period of time that is at a psychological, at a cognitive, and at a physical level. So it's got a three-prong part to it. So the three prongs, so if I look at the physical, is that people feel like they're on a never-ending merry-go-round and can't get off, or feel like they are totally isolated, even though they might be surrounded by a lot of people, they're just not connecting at all with anyone. So they feel like they're in their own world. Mentally, they feel totally overwhelmed or numb, so that even though lots of things are happening around them, they either have gone into this state where they just can't even process anything any longer. So there's like that numbness. And the third is the psychological or the emotional side. And for that is that people can't connect with their feelings any longer. So there's that what is called like a disassociation from their own feelings. So it doesn't matter what feelings they are, they actually can't connect with those either. So there's a lack of connection externally, there's a lack of connection internally with themselves.
But what does that look like if you say you can't connect with your emotions? How would you know when this is happening to you? Or
there's a sense of nothingness. There's that sense of, the world spinning, and you just are looking from the outside in at yourself and at others. And there's just a nothingness or a numbness there. So people are saying, aren't you upset, or aren't you feeling this? And your answer is no to everything.
Rhonda, with burnout, because I definitely experienced some burnout in my previous role, and I think it was probably a slow process of maybe 3 years of getting to that point of this, I just didn't love the job that I had previously loved, and I did feel numb. And one day I got to work and I was sitting in the car and I just physically could not move my legs to get out of the car to do another 12-hour day and then go on call. And I think I was very lucky because I had the option of saying, right, that's it, take a break and make a bit of a decision, or have a bit of a chance to think, do you still love this profession? Do you still love this work? Is it just this one environment that has led to this burnout? Do you want to talk, Rhonda, to the component of burnout that occurs because of the way that you're managed or the environment that you're in? It's not a weakness of the individual necessarily. It's how, where they are and how they're managed that has contributed to that, essentially.
Yeah. And I think, that's a really good point, Louisa. And for us, it's sort of what Louisa's speaking about is what's around you. So what's the system around you that is impacting upon you? And it goes back to what Gerardo spoke about before. And the key indicator of that is a sense of loss of control, a sense of you're being done to. And there's nothing that you can either decide or influence, because you just feel everything's outside your control. And so those things like hours of working, the types of work, the being on call, then coming back and doing another 50 cases the next day, and feeling like you can't influence that, or there's no room for communication to negotiate that done to feeling, people just wear down and wear down and wear down until, like Louisa, their brain can't express it, but they send messages to the body, which is like, you're not going to move your legs because you're not getting out of this car. And that's the way I'm going to tell you that you aren't actually going to be part of this any longer. And that's actually the sad thing. What happens when you put that on steroids is people get sick, and that's the way that their body makes them make a decision about their profession.
Rhonda and I have had this really awful discussion. This is probably getting a bit deep and dark, but in our profession, there's only some certain number of ways that you would leave the profession, and it's either retirement.
Yep.
At this point in time, seems like unlikely for a lot of vets, really. I think they're going to pull the pin a lot earlier. So it's either burnout, suicide. It's just terrible when you think about it.
And what we want to do is get away from that didactic thinking, because that's the didactic thinking that people then feel they've got no choice.
Yeah.
And I'd like to put my hand up and say that's a great topic to talk about, that didactic thinking, because for me, that's the essence of being able to retrieve yourself from feeling like you're on the slippery slide to burnout.
Okay, that sounds like a big topic. Let's bookmark this and say part 2.
Part two is burnout.
Can we wrap up with the last question? You've got an audience of all of the veterinary new grads of the world, and you have a couple of minutes to just give them your one bit of advice. I normally ask this of the vets because they've been through it. So Louisa, we'll start with you.
Oh, just be kind to yourself. Like, no one's going to be as loving and as caring of you as you. And you really do have to just be kind and just accept yourself for who you are. I have this sort of mantra. I know Gerardo was talking about little voices in his head, and I think we all have them. And one of them that goes around and around, if I'm in a situation where I don't really know what the diagnosis is, or I feel a bit out of my depth, is just, well, I'm only human. Like, I'm one person. I'm not a robot. I qualified from vet school. Someone thought I was worthy of a certificate. You know, it's all right. Like, just do your best, and I'm okay with that. But I think it probably comes a fair bit of experience and maturity and life experiences, and maybe post-grad qualifications maybe get you to that point where you can sit there and go, no, I'm all right. I'm okay with this. But that would be my biggest thing, is just be kind to yourself, because I've just, not to frame it as a negative, but just through mentoring, I have been really quite surprised at the negative thoughts that new grads have, you know, can be so unkind to themselves. And it's like, mate, you're part of this profession. Like, welcome. We want you here. You're here. You've made it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, don't cut yourself down.
That expectation that you're going to be great from the start.
Yeah.
And you have to be great from the start. Well, are you surprised that you sucked at that? Of course you're going to suck. Yeah. Rhonda, what about you? Advice for you? I mean, you've spoken to professions of all sorts, and I'm sure many of the problems must be the same. So what do you advise a bunch of people about to embark on this career of ours?
I'd like to say, in conjunction with what Louisa said, is no question is a dumb question. That, you know, often we put a real filter, I shouldn't ask that, I should know it. And so I always say, no question is a dumb question. It's dumb if you don't ask, because you're making that assumption that there's a judgment that's going to be made of you. And, you know, I've never experienced any profession where they aren't encouraging of new grads and new professionals into that sector to absorb and ask as many questions as possible. Yeah, we're so bad at that. I've realized it about myself. You think you don't care what people think, but deep down we really do care what people think, and we do so hate to look stupid. And just to recognize that, for me, is a big thing. To go, why am I scared of this? I mean, why am I scared of asking a question? Just because I don't want to look stupid. But who cares if I look stupid? Nobody cares as much about me as I do. Just ask it. Look stupid, so what? Yeah. Guys, that was really, really amazing, and we will definitely have you back. Thank you very much, Hubert. It's been a delight to have met you, and I really enjoyed this opportunity.
You know those conversations that you have at conferences, back in the days when we still had big vet conferences, when people are chatting to the lecturers and asking questions, and you hear things like, this isn't really in the books, but here's what I think. It's in those kinds of conversations that the best nuggets of wisdom appear, the nitty-gritty real-life details that you can only get from years and years of experience. And it's exactly those kinds of conversations that we try to emulate on the Vet Vault Clinical Podcasts. We don't want lectures. We want to hear about the challenges, the tips, the stuff-ups, this is how I do it. Go to vvn.supercast.net to join in the conversation.